My name is Amanda, 34 years old, and I never believed my perfect life could shatter in a single afternoon. Coming home early from a canceled business trip to Seattle should have been a pleasant surprise for my husband Marcus. Instead, it became the moment that exposed a betrayal so deep it involved the two people I trusted most in this world. My sister Sophia's car in our driveway on a Tuesday afternoon should have been my first warning sign. Before I continue this story, I want to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right in your own home? Share your thoughts below as I take you through what happened next. Marcus and I had built what everyone called the perfect life together. We met 12 years ago at an art gallery opening in downtown Boston. I was there covering the event for the lifestyle magazine I worked for, and he was the architect who had designed the gallery's stunning renovation. He approached me while I stood mesmerized by a contemporary piece, a swirl of blues and grays that seemed to capture storm and calm simultaneously. "It reminds me of the duality of structure and chaos," he said, holding 2 glasses of champagne and offering one to me. His smile was confident but not arrogant, and his eyes, a deep hazel, held genuine interest in my response. "That's exactly what I was thinking," I replied, accepting the champagne, though I was going to write something far less eloquent in my review. We talked for 3 hours that night, long after the gallery had emptied and the catering staff began stacking chairs. Marcus had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room, even in a crowd. He listened intently when I spoke about my dreams of opening my own gallery someday, nodding thoughtfully and asking questions that showed he was truly engaged. Our wedding 2 years later was everything I'd dreamed of and more. We married at a vineyard in Martha's Vineyard on a perfect September afternoon. The ceremony was intimate, just 75 guests, mostly family and close friends. Sophia was my maid of honor, of course. She spent weeks helping me plan every detail, from the lavender bouquets to the string quartet that played during cocktail hour. I still remember how she fussed over my dress that morning, making sure every pearl button down the back was perfectly aligned. "You look absolutely radiant," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus is the luckiest man alive." Marcus and I bought our house in Brookline 5 years ago, a beautiful colonial in a tree-lined neighborhood where kids rode bikes in the summer and neighbors actually knew each other's names. The house needed work, but Marcus saw its potential immediately. He spent months on the renovation plans, transforming every room with his architectural vision. The basement was his particular pride. What had been a dark, musty storage space became a stunning entertainment room. He installed soundproofing, built custom shelving for his extensive vinyl collection, and found the perfect leather sectional that could seat 8 comfortably. The space had a full bar, a pool table, and a 70-inch television mounted on the wall. He even installed a special locking mechanism on the door, explaining it was to keep future kids from accessing the bar area. The lock could be engaged from either side, but when locked from the outside, it was virtually impossible to open from within. "It's completely soundproof too," Marcus had said proudly when showing it off to our friends. "You could have a full concert down here and not hear a thing upstairs." Sophia, my younger sister by 3 years, had always been a constant in my life. Growing up, she followed me everywhere, wanting to dress like me, talk like me, be like me. Our mother used to joke that Sophia was my shadow, and I never minded. I protected her fiercely through high school, when mean girls tried to bully her for her braces and awkward phase. I helped her with college applications, celebrated when she got into Boston University, and held her when her first serious boyfriend broke her heart senior year. When Sophia married Daniel 5 years ago, I was overjoyed for her. Daniel Worthington came from Old Boston. Money worked as a partner at a prestigious law firm and seemed to adore my sister. Their wedding was a grand affair at the Four Seasons, with 300 guests and flowers flown in from Holland. But even then I noticed something. During the father-daughter dance, Sophia's eyes kept drifting to where Marcus and I sat. When I caught her gaze, she quickly looked away. Over the past 2 years, cracks had begun to show in Sophia's marriage. Daniel worked constantly, often traveling to New York or Washington, for cases that kept him away for days at a time. When he was home, he seemed distracted, always on his phone or laptop, barely engaging in conversation. I feel like a ghost in my own marriage. Sophia confided one evening about 8 months ago. We were having our monthly sister dinner at my house, while Marcus was supposedly working late on a project deadline. Daniel and I barely talk anymore. When was the last time Marcus worked this late? Oh, you know how he gets with big projects, I said, pouring her another glass of wine. The new museum design has been consuming him. At least he comes home to you, she said, and there was something in her tone that made me look up. But she was staring into her wine glass, swirling the Merlot absently. The signs had been there for 6 months, maybe longer if I'm honest with myself. Marcus started working late more frequently, always with perfectly reasonable explanations. The museum project, a demanding client, a presentation that needed to be perfect. I never questioned it because Marcus had never given me a reason to doubt him. Sophia began visiting more often, especially during the day when she knew I was at work. She'd text me things like, "Borrowed your blue scarf, hope that's okay," or "Left some cookies on your counter, Marcus let me in." When I asked why she didn't just wait to see me, she said she was in the neighborhood for various appointments. Her therapist, she claimed, had an office nearby. There were other things too. Marcus became protective of his phone, taking it with him even to the bathroom. He started going to the gym religiously, dropping 15 pounds, and buying new clothes without my input. When I complimented his new physique, he seemed almost guilty, mumbling something about wanting to be healthier for our future. 3 months ago, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a restaurant I'd never been to lunch for $297. When I asked about it, he said it was a client lunch and changed the subject. I didn't push. Why would I? This was Marcus, the man who still brought me flowers every Friday, who slow danced with me in our kitchen while dinner cooked, who left love notes in my laptop bag. The business trip to Seattle was supposed to last 3 days. I'd packed, carefully prepared my presentation for the aerospace company, looking to commission art for their new headquarters. But when I arrived at Logan Airport that morning, I discovered the entire flight had been canceled due to mechanical issues. The next available flight wasn't until the following day. "I can reschedule the meeting," my assistant offered when I called her from the airport lounge. "No, I'll catch tomorrow's flight," I said initially. But then something made me reconsider. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just missed my husband. "Actually, yes, please reschedule. I'm going home." I stopped at Marcus's favorite bakery in the North End on my way home, picking up the chocolate croissants he loved and some fresh bread. I imagined his surprise when I walked through the door, pictured us having an impromptu lunch together, maybe spending the afternoon in bed like we used to when we were newly married. The thought made me smile as I navigated through Boston traffic. The house was quiet when I pulled into our driveway at 1:30 that afternoon. Too quiet. Marcus's BMW was in the garage, which wasn't unusual since he often worked from home on Tuesdays. But Sophia's white Mercedes was also there, parked at an angle like she'd been in a hurry. I grabbed the bakery bag and my purse, pushing through the front door that oddly wasn't locked. Marcus was meticulous about locking doors even when he was home. The alarm wasn't set either. "Marcus," I called out, setting my keys in the bowl by the door. "I'm home. My flight got canceled." No response. The living room was immaculate as always, but something felt off. A pair of Marcus's shoes were kicked off by the couch, which was unlike him. He always put his shoes in the closet. Moving into the kitchen, I noticed 2 wine glasses on the counter, one with a lipstick mark in a shade I recognized. Sophia wore that exact color, a deep berry from Chanel she'd made me buy for her last Christmas. There was an open bottle of wine too, a Chateau Margaux we'd been saving for our anniversary. My stomach tightened. Why would Marcus open that bottle for a casual afternoon with my sister? His jacket was draped over a kitchen chair, his watch on the counter. Sophia's purse sat on the breakfast nook bench, her jacket tossed carelessly beside it. The house felt frozen, like a scene interrupted. That's when I heard it. Laughter floating up from the basement. Sophia's distinctive giggle, the one that hadn't changed since she was 7. And Marcus's deep laugh, the one I loved, the one that usually made me smile. But they were laughing together in a way that made my skin crawl. I moved toward the basement door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Each step felt like walking through water. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear music now too, jazz the kind. Marcus played when he was trying to set a mood. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue Ma, the album he'd played the first night we made love. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open wider. I descended the stairs slowly, silently grateful I'd worn flats that made no sound on the carpeted steps. With each step down, their voices became clearer. "You're terrible," Sophia was saying through her laughter. "Amanda would die if she knew." "Amanda doesn't need to know everything," Marcus replied, and his tone was playful, intimate in a way that made bile rise in my throat. 3 more steps and I could see them partially through the stair railings. My legs nearly gave out. Sophia was on the leather sectional wearing Marcus's white dress shirt and nothing else that I could see. The shirt was unbuttoned halfway, her long legs curled under her. Marcus sat beside her in just his boxer briefs, his hand on her thigh, thumb making small circles on her skin. The coffee table held 2 wine glasses, the rest of the anniversary bottle, and Sophia's clothes folded neatly on the side. They were comfortable, relaxed, like this was routine. This wasn't a first time. The familiarity between them, the ease of their intimacy, told me everything. "How long do we have?" Sophia asked, running her fingers through Marcus's hair. "She won't be back from Seattle until Thursday night," he said, leaning into her touch. "We have all the time in the world." "I told Daniel I was at a spa day with friends," she said. He didn't even look up from his laptop. I could have said I was joining the circus, and he would have just nodded. "His loss," Marcus murmured, pulling her closer. "You deserve so much better." "Like you?" she asked, and there was something vulnerable in her voice. "You know how I feel about you, Soph. These past 4 months have been the best of my life," she finished for him. 4 months. They'd been doing this for 4 months. While I was sleeping beside him, trusting him, loving him, he'd been with my sister. While I was comforting Sophia about her failing marriage, she was sleeping with my husband. I must have made a sound, maybe a gasp or a sob, because they both turned toward the stairs. The looks on their faces would have been comical if my world wasn't ending. Marcus jumped up, scrambling for his pants that were on the floor. Sophia grabbed a throw pillow, holding it against herself as if modesty mattered now. "Amanda," Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. "This isn't... I can explain." "Oh my God, Amanda, please," Sophia started. But I couldn't hear any more. I turned and ran up the stairs, their panicked voices calling after me. My hands moved with a strange calm as I reached the basement door. I could hear them both scrambling, Marcus trying to get his pants on, Sophia frantically searching for her clothes. Their panic-filled voices echoed up the stairwell. "Amanda, wait! Please just let me explain!" Marcus shouted, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I slammed the door shut and engaged the lock he'd so proudly installed. The heavy-duty deadbolt slid into place with a satisfying click. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's own meticulous design would be their cage. "Amanda, open this door right now." Marcus's fist pounded against the solid wood. "This is ridiculous. We need to talk about this like adults." "Amanda, please." Sophia's voice was shrill, desperate. "I'm so sorry. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to happen. Just happened. 4 months of deception just happened." I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't sound like me. "Amanda, I know you can hear me," Marcus continued pounding. "Open this door. You can't just lock us in here." But I could, and I did. I walked away from their muffled screams and pounding my mind crystal clear for the first time in months. Everything made sense now. Sophia's sudden interest in Marcus's work, asking detailed questions about his projects at family dinners. The way she touched his arm when she laughed at his jokes. How she always managed to sit next to him at restaurants, their legs probably touching under the table, while I sat across from them oblivious. I remembered 2 months ago when I'd been sick with the flu. Sophia had come over to bring me soup, she said. She stayed for hours and I was grateful, thinking she was taking care of me. But she'd spent most of the time downstairs with Marcus, claiming she was letting me rest. What were they doing while I lay fevered and trusting in my bed? There was the weekend I went to visit our mother in Vermont. Marcus had begged off, citing work deadlines. Sophia had supposedly gone to a yoga retreat. But now I wondered if they'd spent those 3 days in my bed in my home playing house while I was gone. The gym membership Marcus got 4 months ago suddenly had new meaning. He wasn't working out for his health or for me. He was sculpting his body for her. The new cologne he'd started wearing, the one Sophia had complimented at Sunday dinner, saying it was intoxicating. I'd thought nothing of it then. How many times had they texted while I sat beside him on the couch? How many secret glances had they shared at family gatherings? How many lies had they told? Not just to me, but to Daniel, to our parents, to everyone who loved and trusted them. The pounding on the door continued, but the soundproofing Marcus had installed worked both ways. As I walked back upstairs, their voices became faint, then silent. They could scream all they wanted. No one would hear them. In the kitchen, I picked up Sophia's purse, dumping its contents on the counter. Her phone fell out, face up the screen, lighting up with a text from Daniel. In meetings until 5. Don't wait up, might be late again. Poor Daniel. He had no idea his wife was supposed to be at a spa day, while she was actually half naked in my basement with my husband. I picked up her phone knowing her passcode because she'd made me memorize it in case of emergencies. Well, this certainly qualified as an emergency. Her messages were damning. The thread with Marcus went back 4 months, starting innocently enough with questions about restaurant recommendations for Daniel's birthday. But within weeks, they'd progressed to "can't stop thinking about you," and "last night was incredible," and "Amanda almost caught us laughing on the phone. We need to be more careful." There were photos, too. Nothing completely explicit, but intimate enough. Sophia in lingerie I'd never seen, taken in what looked like a hotel room. Marcus shirtless in our bedroom, clearly taken after I'd left for work. The two of them at a restaurant I didn't recognize, looking at each other with such intensity it made me sick. But the worst was a message from 3 weeks ago. Marcus had written, "I love you. I think I've loved you since your wedding day when I watched you walk down that aisle and wished it was toward me." Sophia had replied, "I've loved you longer. Amanda doesn't deserve you. She doesn't appreciate what she has." I didn't deserve him. I didn't appreciate what I had. I'd supported his career, celebrated his successes, comforted him through his father's death, stood by him when his firm nearly went under during the recession. I'd given him everything, and apparently that included access to my sister. I took screenshots of everything, forwarding them to my own phone and email. Then I scrolled through her contacts and found Daniel's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. Daniel deserved to know, but did he deserve to find out like this? The decision was made for me when Sophia's phone rang, Daniel's face filling the screen. He was calling her, probably between meetings, checking in like a good husband. I answered. "Hey, babe." Daniel's voice was warm, tired. "How's the spa day going?" "Hello, Daniel. It's Amanda." Silence. Then, "Amanda. Why do you have Sophia's phone? Is everything okay? Did something happen?" "Something happened, yes. You need to know about it." "Are you somewhere private?" "I'm in my office. Amanda, you're scaring me. Is Sophia hurt?" "Not physically." "Daniel, I need you to listen carefully. Can you come to my house? It's important." "I'm in New York. I can catch the 4 o'clock train. Amanda, please just tell me what's going on." "Sophia is here. At my house. She's with Marcus." "I don't understand. With Marcus? Like they're hanging out?" I took a deep breath. "Daniel, I came home early from my trip and found them together, intimately. They've been having an affair for 4 months. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then I heard a crash, like he'd thrown something against a wall. "Where are they now?" His voice was deadly quiet. "They're still here. I need you to hear something, Daniel. Can you stay on the line?" "Yes." I grabbed my laptop from the counter and made my way to Marcus's home office. He didn't know I knew about the camera system he'd installed in the basement. I discovered it months ago while looking for a flash drive. He'd probably installed it for security, but it was about to serve a different purpose. The feed was clear. Marcus and Sophia had stopped pounding on the door. They sat on the sectional, Sophia now wearing her dress, Marcus in his pants and undershirt. They were talking intensely, gesturing wildly. I connected my phone to the laptop and unmuted the basement feed so Daniel could hear. "This is insane," Marcus was saying. "She can't keep us locked in here forever." "What are we going to do?" Sophia was crying, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Oh God, she's going to tell Daniel. My marriage is over." "Your marriage was over anyway," Marcus said, pulling her against him. "You said so yourself. You haven't been happy for years." "But I didn't want him to find out like this. And Amanda, my sister. Oh God, what have we done?" "We fell in love," Marcus said firmly. "That's what we did. I'm not sorry about it, Sophia. I'm only sorry Amanda had to find out this way." Daniel made a strangled sound on the phone. "Is that live?" he asked. "Yes. They don't know I can see and hear them." "Can you make it so I can talk to them?" "Give me a second." I set up the connection through the laptop, linking Daniel's call to the basement speaker system. Marcus had installed it for parties' surround sound that could make you feel like you were at a concert. Now it would serve as the vehicle for their confession. "Daniel, you're connected. They'll hear you when you speak." I watched the feed as Daniel's voice boomed through the basement speakers. "Hello, Sophia." Both Marcus and Sophia jumped up from the couch, looking around wildly. Sophia's face went white as a sheet. "Daniel," she whispered, then louder. "Daniel, is that you?" "Yes, wife. It's me. Calling from my office in New York, where I'm supposed to believe you're at a spa day with friends." "Daniel, I can explain this isn't what it looks like." Marcus grabbed Sophia's arm. "Don't say anything. This could be recorded." "Oh, it's definitely being recorded," I said into the microphone, my voice filling their prison. "Every word, every confession. Your lawyers are going to love this, both of you." "Amanda, please," Marcus pleaded to the camera he didn't know I knew existed. "We need to talk about this rationally. Yes, I made a mistake, but we can work through this. Couples therapy, whatever you want." "A mistake?" I laughed. 4 months of sneaking around with my sister is a mistake. Planning to run away together is a mistake." "Run away together?" Daniel's voice was sharp. "What is she talking about, Sophia?" Sophia was sobbing now, collapsed on the couch. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen?" Daniel demanded. "Were you going to leave me a note? Send a text? Or just disappear one day with my brother-in-law?" "I'm not your brother-in-law anymore," Marcus said coldly. "I never wanted to be part of your family, Daniel. You're a cold, neglectful husband who drove Sophia into my arms." "Marcus, stop," Sophia begged. But Marcus was on a roll, pacing the basement like a caged animal. "She deserves better than you, Daniel. Better than a man who cares more about billable hours than his wife's happiness. She was dying inside, and you didn't even notice." "And you did." Daniel's voice was bitter. "You noticed while you were married to her sister. How noble of you, Marcus. Tell me, did you notice her unhappiness before or after you started sleeping with her?" "I loved her first," Marcus declared. "I've loved her for years, since before you married her. I should have said something then, but I was already with Amanda and I thought I could be happy with the sister who loved me." I gasped. The sister who loved him, like I was a consolation prize. "You bastard," Daniel said. "Both of you. You're both pathetic." "We're not pathetic, we're in love," Sophia suddenly screamed, standing up. "Yes, we fell in love. So what? Neither of you ever really saw us anyway. Amanda, you were so busy with your perfect life, your perfect marriage, you never noticed I was drowning. And Daniel, when did you last ask me how my day was? When did we last have a conversation that wasn't about your work or your family's expectations?" "So you decided to sleep with my husband," I said into the mic. "That was your solution, not therapy, not communication, not divorce, just betrayal. It wasn't supposed to be like this," Sophia repeated, sinking back onto the couch. "It started innocently. Marcus was helping me understand Daniel better, giving me advice. We'd talk when you were at work, Amanda. Just talk. About life, about dreams, about feeling stuck. And then, Daniel prompted. Marcus sat beside Sophia, taking her hand. Even now, watching them, they looked like a couple, comfortable with each other in a way that spoke of intimacy beyond just 4 months. And then one day I kissed her, Marcus said simply. 2 weeks after her birthday party, Amanda had passed out early from too much wine. Sophia was helping me clean up. We were in the kitchen and she was crying about another fight with Daniel. I meant to comfort her, but when she looked up at me, "You kissed my wife in my house while I was passed out upstairs," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "It was wrong," Sophia said. "We knew it was wrong. We stayed away from each other for 2 weeks after that. But the pull was too strong. We met for coffee to talk about it, to agree it could never happen again." "Let me guess," Daniel said sarcastically. "That's not what happened." "We ended up at a hotel," Marcus admitted. "The Fairmont. Room 812. We've been meeting there every Tuesday and Thursday when Amanda's at her editorial meetings and Daniel's in court. The Fairmont. Where we'd spent our 5th anniversary. Where Marcus had proposed to me in the restaurant. Our special place now tainted forever." "How did you pay for it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Cash," Marcus said. "I've been withdrawing from my personal account. The account I helped you build by supporting us those 2 years when your firm was struggling." Silence. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Daniel's voice was broken now. "We have families, friends, a whole life intertwined. My parents adore you, Sophia. Your parents think Marcus walks on water. How do we explain this?" "We don't have to explain anything to anyone," Marcus said defiantly. "Sophia and I can start fresh. Maybe leave Boston, go somewhere new. I've had job offers in California and London. We could disappear and let you two rebuild." "Disappear?" I laughed bitterly. "Like cowards. Run away and leave Daniel and me to explain to everyone why our marriages simultaneously imploded, leave us to deal with the humiliation while you play house in London." "It's not about humiliation," Sophia said quietly. "It's about love. We didn't mean to hurt you, either of you. But Marcus and I, we're meant to be together. I know it's horrible. I know it's the worst kind of betrayal, but it's also the truth." "The truth," Daniel repeated. "You want truth, Sophia. Here's truth. I've been working myself to death trying to make senior partner so we could have the life you said you wanted. The house in Wellesley, the kids you keep talking about, the security you said was important after growing up watching your parents struggle. Every 16-hour day, every weekend at the office, every missed dinner was for us. For you. I didn't ask you to kill yourself for money," Sophia protested. "No, you just asked for the lifestyle that money would provide. The designer clothes, the luxury car, the country club membership you had to have to keep up with your book club friends." "That's not fair." "Fair." Daniel's voice rose. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been talking to me about your unhappiness. Fair would have been marriage counseling. Fair would have been asking for a divorce before you started sleeping with your sister's husband. And you, Marcus?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Was any of it real? Our marriage, our plans, the baby we've been trying for?" The silence that followed was deafening. "You've been trying for a baby." Sophia's voice was small, hurt. "You didn't tell her?" I asked Marcus. "You didn't tell your mistress that your wife has been going through fertility treatments for the past 6 months, that we've been to 3 specialists, that I've been injecting myself with hormones every night, hoping to give you the child you said you wanted?" Marcus put his head in his hands. "Amanda." "No," I cut him off. "You don't get to say my name. You lost that right when you chose her." I heard Daniel moving on his end of the phone, papers rustling, keys jangling. "I'm heading to the airport," he said. "I'll be there in 3 hours. "Daniel, no," Sophia pleaded. "Please, we can talk about this when you're calmer." "Calmer," Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I am calm, Sophia. Deadly calm. I'm coming to get my things from our house and then I'm filing for divorce. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight." "You can't kick me out of my own house." "Watch me. It's my family's property. Remember? The house you complained wasn't big enough. The one you said didn't reflect your style. It's in my name, Sophia. Only my name. Daniel, please. But Daniel had hung up. The basement was quiet except for Sophia's soft crying. I looked at the screen one more time. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. These two people I'd loved most in the world, reduced to cheaters caught in their own web of lies. I'm going to open the door now, I said into the microphone. You're going to leave my house immediately. Marcus, your things will be packed and sent to wherever you're staying. Don't come back, either of you. Amanda, we need to talk about the house, the finances, Marcus started. My lawyer will talk to your lawyer. I've already sent the evidence to my attorney. I suggest you both get very good representation. I went to the basement door and unlocked it. Then I walked to the kitchen and waited. It took them 5 minutes to come up, both looking disheveled and small. They couldn't meet my eyes. Marcus stopped in front of me. Amanda, I know you hate me right now, but I need you to know that I did love you. In my way. In your way, I repeated. Your way of loving involved betraying me with the one person I trusted more than anyone. Your way of loving involved lying to me every day for 4 months. Your way of loving involved letting me inject myself with fertility drugs while you were planning a future with my sister. The fertility treatments, he started, were a waste, I finished. Thank God we never conceived. Can you imagine a baby binding me to you forever? Sophia stepped forward. Amanda, you're my sister. We've been through everything together. Please, can't we find a way past this? In time. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still the little girl I'd protected from bullies, still the woman I'd called my best friend. But now she was also the woman who'd stolen my husband, who'd violated the sacred trust between sisters. We're done, Sophia. Whatever we were, whatever we had, it's over. You killed it the moment you kissed him in my kitchen. But family. You should have thought about family before you spread your legs for my husband. The slap came from nowhere. Sophia's hand connected with my cheek, the sound echoing in the kitchen. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Don't you dare, he said to me. Don't you dare talk to her like that. I touched my stinging cheek and laughed. Defending your mistress from your wife? How noble. Stop calling her that. She's not my mistress. She's the woman I love. She's my sister who betrayed me. You're my husband who broke every vow he made. Call it whatever you want, but you're both traitors. They gathered their things in silence. Sophia's hands shook as she picked up her purse. Marcus pocketed his watch and phone. At the door, Marcus turned back. The museum project presentation is on Thursday. The files are on my desktop. I don't care. It's a $40 million project, Amanda. The firm needs this. Then the firm should have thought about that before you decided to fuck my sister. He flinched at my crudeness. Good. Let them flinch. Let them hurt a fraction of what I was feeling. They left together, of course they did. I watched from the window as they got into their separate cars. Marcus paused by Sophia's window, saying something that made her nod. Then they drove away, Marcus following Sophia's Mercedes down our tree-lined street. The house felt different with them gone. Emptier, but also cleaner somehow, like poison had been extracted. I walked through each room, seeing our life together with new eyes. The wedding photos on the mantel, Marcus and I smiling, like we knew something wonderful the world didn't. The throw pillows Sophia had helped me pick out, saying they made the room more inviting. The kitchen where we'd all shared countless dinners, Sophia and Marcus probably playing footsie under the table, while Daniel and I remained oblivious. 2 hours later, Daniel arrived. He looked haggard. His usually perfect suit rumpled, his tie loosened. We stood in my foyer, two people who'd been destroyed by the same betrayal. I'm sorry, he said finally. I should have seen it. Should have known something was wrong. We both should have, I replied. But we trusted them. That's what you do when you love someone. He laughed bitterly. Trust. What a concept. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought about leaving her. 6 months ago, I had the divorce papers drawn up. But then she seemed happier, more affectionate. I thought we were turning a corner. She was happier because she was with Marcus. And Marcus seemed happier too, didn't he? More attentive to you. I thought about it. He was right. The past 4 months, Marcus had been more romantic. Flowers every week instead of occasionally. Date nights he planned. Little gifts for no reason. Guilt gifts, I realize now. They were happy because they had their cake and were eating it too, I said. The security of their marriages and the excitement of their affair. Daniel moved to the living room, collapsing on the couch. I got us both whiskey, the good stuff Marcus had been saving. Seemed appropriate to drink it now. What are you going to do? Daniel asked. Divorce him. Take him for everything I can. You? Same. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, but infidelity factors into alimony. With the evidence you collected, we'll both come out ahead financially. It's not about the money. No, he agreed. It's about the principle. They want to be together, fine, but they'll pay for the privilege. We drank in silence for a while, the weight of our situation settling over us like a blanket. My parents are going to be devastated, Daniel said. They love Sophia. My mother was just saying last week how lucky I was to have her. My parents will be worse. They'll blame themselves somehow. Wonder what they did wrong raising us. And Marcus's mother, she still calls me her favorite daughter-in-law, and he's an only child. The holidays are going to be interesting. I'm not doing holidays with them. They made their choice. They can explain to everyone why the family is broken. Daniel raised his glass. To broken families and new beginnings. I clinked my glass against his. To surviving betrayal. We talked until midnight, sharing stories we'd never noticed before. How Sophia always insisted on sitting next to Marcus at restaurants. How Marcus always knew what Sophia wanted to drink before she ordered. The inside jokes they shared that we'd dismissed as harmless family bonding. You know what I keep thinking about, Daniel said, slightly drunk now. Their wedding days, both of them, standing up there making vows to us while apparently pining for each other. Marcus's speech at your wedding, I remembered suddenly. He went on and on about how lucky you were, how Sophia was a treasure. I thought he was being a good brother-in-law. And Sophia's maid of honor speech at your wedding. She cried through half of it, said you were getting your fairy tale ending with your Prince Charming. Some fairy tale? Some prince? Daniel stood to leave, swaying slightly. I should get a hotel. Can't go home knowing she might show up. You can stay in the guest room if you want. Seems stupid to pay for a hotel when I have space. He looked at me gratefully. You sure? We're family, right? The rejected family, but still family. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments looking for signs I'd missed. The family barbecue where Marcus and Sophia had volunteered to get ice cream gone for over an hour. The Christmas Eve when they'd both stepped out for fresh air during dessert. The birthday dinner where Sophia had worn a new dress that Marcus had complimented extensively while Daniel and I talked about work. At 3 a.m, my phone buzzed. Marcus. Please, Amanda. We need to talk. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I deleted it without responding. Another text from Sophia. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're my sister. Please don't shut me out forever. I blocked her number. By morning, word had gotten out. My mother called at 7, hysterical. Amanda Sophia just called me crying. Something about Marcus and a misunderstanding. What's happening? It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. Sophia and Marcus have been having an affair. For 4 months. I caught them yesterday. Silence. Then my mother's broken voice. No, that's not possible. Sophia would never. Marcus would never. They did, Mom. I have proof. Photos, messages, video. They did this. But your sisters. Sisters don't. Apparently this one does. There must be an explanation. Maybe it was just emotional. Maybe they didn't actually. Mom, I caught them half-dressed in my basement. They've been meeting at hotels twice a week. It's not a misunderstanding. My mother was sobbing now. How could this happen? You girls were so close. And Marcus, he's been part of our family for 10 years. I don't know, Mom. I don't know how they could do this. What can I do? How can I help? Just don't take sides. I know she's your daughter too, but please don't ask me to forgive her. Not now. Maybe not ever. Oh, sweetheart. My poor girls. Both of you hurting so much. She's not hurting Mom. She's in love. She told me so while I had her locked in my basement. You locked them in the basement. It seemed appropriate at the time. Despite everything, my mother laughed. A sad, broken laugh, but still. Your father is going to have a heart attack. He was just bragging to his golf buddies about his successful sons-in-law. Well, now he can brag about his daughter the cheater and his other daughter the divorcee. Don't say that. You're so much more than this situation. But was I? For 10 years, I'd been Marcus's wife. For 34 years, I'd been Sophia's sister. Who was I without those identities? The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers' paperwork and moving trucks. Marcus tried to contact me repeatedly, even showing up at my office until security escorted him out. I'd had the locks changed the day after I kicked them out, but he still tried his key standing on the porch, looking confused when it didn't work. The divorce proceedings were straightforward given the evidence. Marcus didn't contest anything, probably on his lawyer's advice. He moved into a downtown apartment, one of those soulless glass towers he used to mock. Sophia left Boston entirely, staying with a college friend in New York, while Daniel fast-tracked their divorce. The house felt too big, too empty. Every room held memories I wanted to forget. The kitchen where we'd cooked together, Marcus dancing me around while pasta boiled over. The bedroom where we'd made love, where we'd planned our future, where I'd cried happy tears the day we got married. The basement I couldn't even enter anymore. 3 months after that horrible day, I put the house on the market. It sold in a week to a young family, the wife pregnant with their second child. They gushed about the basement, how perfect it would be for movie nights with the kids. I wanted to warn them that rooms could hold betrayal, that soundproofing could hide sins, but I just smiled and accepted their offer. I used the money to buy a loft in the South End, all exposed brick and large windows, and no memories. I threw myself into work, finally pitching the gallery idea I'd been sitting on for years. To my surprise, my editor supported it, even offered to be an investor. "You've been different lately," she said over lunch. "More focused, more driven. Whatever happened, it's made you stronger. Had it, or had it just made me harder?" Daniel and I met for coffee weekly. A strange friendship born from shared trauma. He was seeing a therapist, working through his anger and trust issues. He'd lost weight, started running marathons, something he'd always wanted to do, but Sophia had said was a waste of time. I got an email from her yesterday. He told me one afternoon, 6 months after everything imploded. She wanted me to know she and Marcus aren't together anymore. I nearly dropped my coffee. What? Apparently, once they could be together openly, the thrill was gone. They lasted 3 months. She's moving to California, starting over. Marcus is still in Boston, I think. 3 months. They'd destroyed 2 marriages, shattered families, broken hearts for 3 months of being together. "How do you feel about that?" I asked. Vindicated, angry. I don't know. Part of me is glad they're miserable. Part of me is furious that they ruined everything for something that couldn't even last a season. Did she say why they broke up? She said once they didn't have to sneak around once it was real, they realized they were more in love with the idea of each other than actually each other. She said the guilt ate at them. They couldn't be together without thinking about us. Good, I thought. Let them suffer. Let the memory of their betrayal poison whatever they thought they had. A week later, I ran into Marcus at Whole Foods. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled shirt, the kind of disheveled that spoke of depression rather than casual indifference. "Amanda," he said, his voice rough. "You look good." "Thanks," I said, moving to pass him. "Wait, please. Just give me 1 minute." Against my better judgment, I stopped. "I destroyed everything," he said. "My marriage, your relationship with your sister Daniel's, trust, our families." For what? For some fantasy that fell apart the moment it became real. "That's not my problem anymore, Marcus." I know it's not. I just wanted you to know that I'll regret this for the rest of my life. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away for an illusion." No, I corrected him. You threw it away for my sister. You threw it away for sneaking around for the thrill of the forbidden. You threw away 10 years of marriage for 4 months of excitement. It wasn't even that exciting once the secrecy was gone, he admitted. Without the sneaking around, without the danger of being caught, Sophia and I had nothing to talk about. We'd built our entire relationship on betraying you and Daniel. Without that common ground, we were strangers. I really don't care, Marcus. I know you don't. But I needed to say it. I needed you to know that losing you was the worst mistake of my life. No, I said finally, looking him in the eyes. The worst mistake was betraying me in the first place. Losing me was just the consequence. I left him standing there in the produce section, surrounded by organic vegetables and regret. My mother tried several times to reconcile Sophia and me. She'd call with updates I didn't ask for. Sophia was in therapy. Sophia was sorry. Sophia missed me. Sophia wanted to explain. There's nothing to explain, Mom, I told her. She wanted my husband. She took him. End of story. But you're sisters. No, we were sisters. Now we're just two people who share DNA and nothing else. You might feel differently in time. Maybe. But right now, today and tomorrow, and probably for a very long time, I want nothing to do with her. A year after that day in the basement, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. The gallery was thriving, showcasing local artists who'd never had a platform before. I'd started dating cautiously an architect, ironically named James, who made me laugh and had never met Sophia. Daniel had started dating a doctor he'd met at his marathon. We still met for coffee monthly. Our bond evolved from shared pain to genuine friendship. Do you ever think about forgiveness? He asked one day. Sometimes. Not for them, but for me. They say forgiveness is about freeing yourself, not absolving the other person. Have you forgiven? No. Let go mostly. I don't think about them every day anymore. Sometimes I go whole weeks without remembering. That's progress, right? It is. I still have bad days. Triggers. Like I can't listen to jazz anymore. It reminds me of that day. I can't eat chocolate croissants. I was bringing Marcus his favorite from the bakery when I found them. We sat in comfortable silence, two survivors of the same shipwreck, floating on our separate but parallel life rafts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply revealing the truth and walking away with your dignity intact. The basement that day didn't just trap two cheaters. It freed one woman to finally live her truth. Marcus and Sophia thought they were in love, but they were just in love with the thrill of deception. They thought they were building something special, but they were just destroying everything real. They thought they could have it all, but they ended up with nothing. I learned that family isn't just blood. Daniel became more of a brother to me than Sophia ever was a sister. My gallery staff became my chosen family, supporting me through the hardest year of my life. My true friends, the ones who didn't make me choose sides or tell me to forgive for the sake of family. They showed me what loyalty really looked like. The house in Brookline has a new family now. Sometimes I drive by and see kids playing in the yard, the basement windows lit up with the blue glow of a television. I hope their basement holds movie nights and birthday parties, not secrets and betrayal. I hope those soundproof walls echo with laughter, not lies. Marcus still sends me messages on what would have been our anniversary. I don't read them anymore, just delete them unopened. Sophia sent a letter, once pages and pages of explanation and apology. I burned it unread in the fireplace of my new loft, watching the pages curl and blacken, taking her words and turning them to ash, much like she did to our sisterhood. My mother has learned to have separate relationships with us. She sees Sophia in California twice a year. She tells me Sophia is doing well, has a job she loves, is in therapy. I tell her I'm glad and I mean it. I don't wish Sophia ill. I just wish her gone from my life, and that wish has been granted. The fertility treatments I'd been doing stopped, obviously. But a strange thing happened. Once the stress of this betrayal and divorce was over, once I'd rebuilt my life on my own terms, I realized I didn't want children anymore. Not because of what happened, but because I discovered I'd wanted them for the wrong reasons. I'd wanted them to complete the picture of the perfect life I thought I was supposed to have. Now, living authentically for the first time, I realized my gallery was my baby. My artists were my legacy. James doesn't want children either. We've been together 8 months now, taking things slowly, building trust carefully, like constructing a house of cards. He knows the whole story, knows why I sometimes freeze when his phone buzzes late at night, knows why I can't watch movies about infidelity, knows why I don't have any pictures of my sister in my apartment. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told me recently. "Not because you locked them in the basement, though, that was pretty badass, but because you walked away. You didn't seek revenge beyond revealing the truth. You didn't destroy their careers or trash them on social media. You just walked away and rebuilt." But here's the truth. I don't tell James, don't tell anyone except Daniel, who understands I did seek revenge. My revenge was living well. My revenge was succeeding without them. My revenge was proving that I didn't need a husband or a sister to be complete. My revenge was becoming myself fully and authentically, something I'd never been while trying to be the perfect wife and sister. The basement incident, as Daniel and I call it, has become legend among our friend group. People who don't know the full story think it's dramatic, extreme crazy even. But those who know, who understand the depth of the betrayal, they get it. Sometimes you need to lock the door on people who've hurt you. Sometimes you need to let them hear the consequences of their actions echoing off soundproof walls. Sometimes you need to trap them with their truth before you can free yourself from their lies. I still have the recording from that day. Video and audio of their confessions, their declarations of love, their inability to see what they'd done wrong until it was too late. I've never watched it again, but I keep it as insurance, as proof that it really happened, that I didn't imagine the betrayal that reshattered my world. One day maybe I'll delete it. One day maybe I'll be so far past this that I won't need the evidence anymore. But not today. Today I'm still healing, still growing, still becoming whoever Amanda is supposed to be when she's not defined by the people who betrayed her. The funny thing about betrayal is that it reveals truth in the most painful way possible. Marcus and Sophia revealed their true selves that day in the basement, but more importantly, they revealed mine. I wasn't the woman who would forgive anything for the sake of family. I wasn't the wife who would try to work through any problem. I was a woman who knew her worth, who could walk away from anyone who didn't value her, who could lock the door on toxicity and throw away the key. So when people ask me if I regret locking them in the basement, if I regret the nuclear option of calling Daniel and letting him hear their confessions, if I regret burning every bridge with my sister and my ex-husband, I tell them the truth. My only regret is that I didn't see who they really were sooner. My only regret is the years I wasted believing in people who were capable of such betrayal. But I don't regret the basement. I don't regret the locked door, the phone call to Daniel, the divorce papers already drawn up when Marcus came begging. I don't regret choosing myself over family harmony, choosing truth over comfortable lies, choosing dignity over denial. Because sometimes the best thing you can do is lock the door on people who hurt you and walk away. Sometimes soundproof walls are exactly what you need to muffle their excuses. Sometimes the only way forward is to trap the past behind a deadbolt of your own making and lose the key. And sometimes, just sometimes, the basement that was meant to entertain becomes the stage for the greatest performance of your life, the moment you stop being a supporting character in someone else's love story and become the hero of your own. That's my story. That's how I found my husband and sister, half-dressed in the basement, locked them in, and let their own words destroy what they thought they were building. That's how I learned that family isn't who you're born to, but who stands by you when your world falls apart. That's how I discovered that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served through a speaker system while your cheating husband and sister realize their entire house of cards is collapsing. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to know that it gets better. Not easier, and better. You learn to trust again carefully. You learn to love again wisely. You learn that your worth isn't determined by who stays, but by who you become after they leave. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and your own dignity? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about trust and betrayal and the strength it takes to walk away, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know, that they can survive betrayal and come out better on the other side. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to lock the door on people who don't deserve you. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiveness, but walking away. And sometimes a soundproof basement and a good lock are exactly what you need to set yourself free. Until next time, this is Amanda reminding you that you are worthy of loyalty, deserving of truth, and strong enough to lock any door that needs locking. Thank you for being here, and remember to choose yourself always.